Most parents in Georgia are ready for a big change inside high schools when it comes to cell phones. A new poll out of Emory now says a vast majority supports banning the devices during the school day. The findings from the Rollins School of Public Health show 71% of Georgia parents back banning cell phones in high school. Nearly 9 out of 10 also say a ban would help students focus and improve academics. But not every parent is on board, of course. The poll found 3 out of every 4 parents who oppose a ban say they're concerned mostly about reaching their kids in emergencies. So let's dial into the numbers a little bit deeper with Dr. Julie Gazmararian, a professor of epidemiology at Emory University's Rollins School of Public Health. Good morning. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
So what stands out to you most as a public health researcher when you hear these numbers from parents?
I think that, as you said, 70% support the ban, which is very encouraging, and they're primarily citing concerns of the distractions that kids have during the school day, and also their social and mental well-being, and the constant access of cell phones. So there's wide support for having the ban in high schools.
So what does research say about the impact of kids having their cell phones during learning hours?
What we're finding, and the research is very early in the development, but we're finding that when you remove the cell phones, the kids are more engaged in the classroom. There's more interaction with the kids. The teachers feel they can focus more in the classroom. There's less disruption. And it's been very overwhelmingly positive once the cell phones are removed.
And parents very strongly spoke about mental health and learning and how phones impact that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, we're hearing that from both parents and students in terms of the distraction, and just when they're removed, it's a more equalizing effect of kids having all kids not having phones and having the opportunity to engage and talk to kids that they may not usually talk to, and just more conversation in the both classroom, but at lunchtime and outside of class time, due to just having more social interaction, has been very positive.
And I'm curious, of course, this survey was parents. What have teachers said about the impact of cell phones?
From what we have heard, schools that have implemented policies, teachers are overwhelmingly positive. They feel like they're in a new school with kids talking to each other, kids paying more attention in the class, and less disciplinary issues that they have to deal with during class time. So they can focus more on teaching and helping the kids learn.
So, of course, teachers reacting to what they see in the classroom. Are parents reacting more to what they see at home when their kids are after school?
We have not looked at that question so much, and that's something that we hope to look at in the future. In terms of what impact it's having after school.
Right, that'll be really interesting as this research starts to develop, as you get more data as well. And there's also research saying cell phones, even just being in the room, has an impact on student learning.
It is a distraction, even the constant being, and it's not for students, it's for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're all aware of the distraction that they bring to us.
Yeah, I remember reading an NPR article saying that even just having your phone out on the table when you're at dinner with somebody, your mind is not fully there. So to wrap this up, it sounds like you and other researchers, you're encouraged by this. And what do you hope to see in the future?
Well, I think we hope to do more research to really document, the strong impact it's having during school, and then also look at the impact it has out of school time too. Yeah. And ultimately to involve more parents in terms of how they monitor cell phone use at home, and providing tools and assistance for being able to address that.
It is no secret that Georgia's schools and schools around the country have struggled with the challenge of chronic absenteeism, and it has become even more challenging since the COVID pandemic. The issue of students not showing up for school, not attending, and frequently not attending. It is a challenge that families, communities, school districts have been battling. We have Professor Tim Sass now joining us. He is a Georgia State University professor. Professor, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Thanks for making the time to be with us. I know that you and I believe a few colleagues have really been working to drill down on this issue of chronic absenteeism, looking for the root causes and importantly, identify solutions. Can you tell us at the 30,000-foot view a little bit about your work?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, that since the return of students to classes after the end of the pandemic, chronic absenteeism has been a big problem throughout the metro area and Georgia and the U.S. We were approached by Fulton County Schools to take a look at a pilot program they initiated to try and address the issue. And what they did was to offer students a sort of second chance bus ride in the morning. So if a student didn't show up for school, then they would get a notification, be it by text or email, or in some cases, personalized phone calls. And then the district sent around a school bus along the normal route, starting at about 9:15, to pick up students that didn't make it to school.
It was almost I mean, you described it as a second chance bus. I think it was in the literature I read, it was called the attendance recovery bus. And it was effectively, if a student doesn't make it onto the bus at the normal pickup time, faculty, staff, school administrators would put the word out that you got to send that bus back around and try to get that student another shot at getting into the classroom, right?
That's right. And the pilot was done in 2 elementary schools in the South Fulton area. Prior research shows that improvements in attendance over the last couple of years have been uneven. Schools in more affluent areas have seen a much greater improvement in absenteeism than schools serving areas where there's high rates of poverty. So Fulton County Schools wanted to pilot this recovery bus in 2 South Fulton schools. And that began at the end of January 2025. And we worked with the district to try and evaluate the impact of that recovery bus.
What did you find? Was the recovery bus program effective?
Unfortunately, no. We compared students in the 2 pilot schools with students in other South Fulton elementary schools. And before the pilot, the attendance rate tracked along very similar with these 2 schools having somewhat higher rates of absenteeism, but followed the same sort of pattern. And then after the recovery bus program started, we didn't see any improvement. If anything, the gap between these 2 pilot schools and other South Fulton elementaries seemed to widen a bit. So unfortunately, it didn't have a significant improvement in attendance for the schools in the pilot program.
Professor, let me ask you just a couple more questions on this front, and then I want to let you go because I know you're doing important work at Georgia State and on an important topic here when we're talking about kids and their education and their access to education. I would be remiss if I did not raise this question. I'm sure others who are watching may be thinking of this too. Given the scope of the challenge of absenteeism and students missing school, this recovery bus program only happened in 2 elementary schools. It was fairly limited. Is there a chance that because of the limited scope that skewed the results at all?
Well, that's possible. It's a small sample, but also the district intentionally picked these 2 schools because they had high rates of absenteeism. So one would think that if the program was going to be effective, it would be in these schools. And what we found was that the recovery bus wasn't used very much. Typical day, maybe 10, 12 kids between the 2 schools were picked up on this recovery bus. Some days as high as 20, but it wasn't used very often. About a third of the kids that rode the bus only rode it once during the spring semester. So I think that was part of the problem. Is just there wasn't much take up from the students.
Professor, do you have a sense of, and I want to ask you these last 2 questions, they're somewhat in tandem, but I want to ask them one by one to avoid confusing myself here. But Do you have a sense of what the main driving factors of chronic absenteeism are?
Well, it's hard to pick one or two. There's a lot of factors. Some of the most important things seem to be that if parents are made aware that their child is missing school more than other kids, seems to matter. Transportation does seem to be an issue that people talk about. And then more generally, there's at least some suggestive evidence that people's attitudes toward the importance of attendance has changed. During the pandemic, obviously, kids were learning remotely, and it seems like there's less of an emphasis on attendance. There's less engagement with school amongst many students. So that could be the overriding factor.
Professor, last question for you, and I know this is a complex area, and I know you and your team are researching it. The recovery bus in your findings was not all that effective. You laid out some of the driving factors of the problem. Do you have any sense of different programs, different initiatives that may have a chance of more successfully addressing this absenteeism problem?
Yeah, I think there's some evidence, and in fact, work that we did at Georgia State prior to the pandemic, that having personalized messages to students and their parents, letting them know not only that their child missed school, but also how often they're missing school and how that compares to other students. That some parents seem unaware that their student is missing a lot of class relative to other students. So we think information is an important factor, but there's a lot we still don't know about the absenteeism problem, and more work to be done.
A major development after the FBI's raid on a Fulton County elections office last week, where agents seized ballots and election records tied to the 2020 election. Fulton County are now saying the federal government has gone too far, and later today plan to file a lawsuit in federal court demanding the FBI return those ballots immediately. So joining us now is Fulton County Commissioner Marvin Arrington Jr., who's been directly involved in pushing this legal response forward. Good morning.
Good morning, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. So very plainly, Commissioner, what is the county asking the court to do?
Well, we're asking the court to limit the search warrant, right? Here's what happens. We'll be filing today a 41G motion, basically asking the court for a forensic copy of any and all records that were taken, asking that the records be returned to the state of Georgia. And so, we have to do something to protect our citizens, to protect the voter information and the voter rolls. A judge was going to give them, had already indicated that he would allow them to get a copy of these records, but they would have had to pay approximately $450,000 to obtain the records. So in lieu of waiting for that order from the judge, they basically did an end around and by filing this criminal action. And it's just very concerning because the statutes that are listed in the search warrant are misdemeanor statutes whose statute of limitations has expired. And so just don't think that the judge is going to be happy that they did an end around on his order in order to obtain these records and basically, just steal the voting records, right? They stole our original ballots, stole the original absentee ballots and the original provisional ballots, and they broke the chain of custody, which is very important. And because now we will not be able to know if they lost ballots, added ballots, or anything because they took all of our original records.
So do you think this raid threatens the independence of Fulton County's elections?
Well, hopefully not. I think what they're trying to do is sow seeds of distrust into the election process. There's a delicate balance of trust, and we need all voters to know that Fulton County has integrity in its election process And all this does is just make people think that maybe perhaps something was done wrong. But there were 3 recounts. There was an independent audit by the Republican-led State Elections Committee, and there were 10 lawsuits filed by the Trump or his people that were all dismissed. And so these election results from 2020, the 2020 Fulton County presidential election results were valid. They were counted time and time again, and Trump lost by 240,000 votes. It was 76%, 73% to 26%. And so there's no question about the outcome of the 2020 election. If they were actually worried about fraud in Fulton County elections, they would have also pulled the 2016 and 2024 election results. But because he won in 2016 and 2024, they didn't pull those results. And so that's just further proof that they don't even believe that there was fraud in Fulton County.
So I want to end by asking you this. Fulton County has a nonpartisan election coming up in May, and then, of course, we have the big midterm election in November. What is your message to voters before those elections?
Well, my message to voters is very simple, that we are going to have a free and fair election in Fulton County. We always do that. We have the greatest election workers in the country. And, you know, everyone is human, but we make sure that we have the best people in place so that we can have fairness in our elections process.
Hey, have you heard about The Stitch? It's a planned park center development that will physically connect Midtown and downtown Atlanta. And excited this morning to be talking with Jack Seeby, the new CEO and president of Stitch, Inc., the organization overseeing the project. Hey, Jack, good morning to you, man.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, so catch us up on The Stitch, what it's all about, and your organization.
Yeah, well, The Stitch is a exciting initiative here in the heart of downtown Atlanta. We've been working with a lot of partners downtown the city, Atlanta Downtown Improvement District, Central Atlanta Progress, for many years on this initiative to cap and cover the downtown connector, a portion of it, and turn it into new park space that will be the center of a lot of new housing, a lot of new retail and development in North Downtown near Emory Midtown Hospital. So effectively creating a new neighborhood within the heart of downtown Atlanta.
When you say cap and cover the connector, what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so we, if you think about, if you're familiar with the downtown connector in Atlanta, a good bit of it travels underneath the city streets like Peachtree Street, Cortlandt Street. And so what we're doing is effectively installing new bridges in between those existing bridges that pass over the downtown connector today. And on top of this new bridge, or these new bridges, will be new park space, about 17 acres of it. And so, you know, in the future, you won't even realize that this the downtown connector is there running underneath your feet when you're in this park space. It will just feel like there's this great park always there. The downtown connector will remain the same layout, but will be effectively in a tunnel once the Stitch is completed.
And when will the Stitch be completed? When will ground be broken? And how long could this take?
Yeah, right now our target is to start construction in 2027. And the first phase, we plan on completing around 2030, 2031 at this point. There are 3 total phases, all in combined around 17 acres of park space, a park around the size of 4th Ward Park off the Beltline, if you've been to that park. Those 3 phases we anticipate would take around 10 years to complete, assuming all the money and you know, the needed elements of the project happen when we have them planned.
Well, it sounds like you have the money secured for phase 1, right? It's just kind of 2 and 3 that's up in the air at this point.
We have partial funding for phase 1 this year. we were working with the city, with the mayor's office, and with other partners to fill that remaining gap for phase one. And we're confident that we'll begin construction in 2027 at this point.
What kind of economic value could this project pump back into the city, into the state once it's completed? And what about jobs created?
Yeah, it's huge. That's the the tagline there. It's a beltline size economic impact. The entire 22-mile Beltline Trail concentrated in downtown Atlanta. And so that equates to about $9 billion of economic impact. We expect the stitch will generate upwards of 5,000 jobs. It will generate around 25,000 multifamily homes. We all know that housing and housing affordability is a big challenge and a big priority of Mayor Dickens' administration right now. So this is a big part of that solution. So it will do a whole lot for our city and our metro in terms of economic value and value to citizens and the neighborhood.
All right. Well, this is the first I've heard about the potential for all these homes coming up here. Where would you find the space for that? And do you have developers lining up saying pick me, pick me?
Well, it's a true public-private partnership. So we are building the park and removing the noisy, loud, hot environment of the interstate by putting in a tunnel, replacing it with a park. And around the Stitch today, there's about 50 acres of developable land, parking lots, vacant buildings, etc. And so it's a huge opportunity right in the middle of our city, next to MARTA, next to jobs, to inject a whole lot of new housing in our city. And it's currently not happening today because it's not an especially great place to want to live. So we're trying to change that with this project.
Where can folks go for more information, and when do you think, I guess, what is going to be the first visible sign for people who drive through this area downtown that, okay, this is no longer just a gap in highway, this is an actual project underway?
Yeah, so the stitchatl.com is the project website. We post, there's all the information you would ever want about the project on the website. We have some social media channels as well, but the website's a great spot to start. And there's also a newsletter on our website that you can subscribe to. We post regular updates. There you go, right there. And right now, so last year, if you heard some of the news around Downtown Day, we've started activating that area. We threw up some signs, some renderings of the park, cleaned up that little triangle of park space there at Peachtree Street and Ivan Allen with help of the community. We had a bunch of community members come out and help pitch in, plant some new plants. And so stuff has already happened, but this year with the start of this new organization, Stitch Inc., and installation of our new board, and that new resources that brings, we're going to be doing programming throughout the year that we think that folks will hear about, get excited about, be able to come down and participate in. So we're really kicking things off in full swing this year.
President Trump has made his pick for the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. On Friday, he tapped former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh to replace Jerome Powell when his term ends this spring. Currently, he is a fellow at the public policy think tank Stanford's Hoover Institution. So let's bring in Sarah Foster, economic analyst at Bankrate, to break down what this really means for your money. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me this morning, Rachel.
So let's start here, Sarah. For people at home, what's the simplest way to explain why a new Fed chair matters to them?
I like to think about the Fed chair as a front man in a band. So like a Mick Jagger, Rolling Stones type of Kurt Cobain, Nirvana, if maybe you're more into 90s grunge. It's not necessarily that this is a person who's more important than everybody else, but he is kind of the face of the Fed. He's kind of the communicator in chief, as I'd put it. A lot of the attention is on him. He's the one who's responsible for communicating for the rest of the committee. And inside the boardroom where interest rate decisions are made, he's really the one who's supposed to be kind of steering the committee to a consensus. And that might be pretty difficult this time, as we know that a lot of officials are kind of disagreeing about what their next steps are.
So, Sarah, break down Warsh's philosophy and how it'll impact the Fed moving forward.
Kevin Warsh, 20 years ago, when he was previously on the Fed, was someone who was very inflation-minded. He actually, in transcripts, is seen kind of going head-to-head with many officials, arguing that they shouldn't be keeping interest rates too low for too long because it could lead to higher prices. He's also someone that's a little bit more wonky, but he's someone who is really mindful about quantitative easing and some of these unconventional policies that the Fed took during the Great Recession and then the coronavirus pandemic to expand the money supply. He argues that that kind of overstepped its reach and maybe resulted in some of these inflation challenges and affordability problems that many households are facing. But it's a little bit different than kind of what he's arguing this time. He, as President Trump has been very vocal about, he's someone who wants to lower interest rates. That, of course, was President Trump's #1 quality and his pick for the next Fed chair. So how he'll reconcile those policy differences from 20 years ago with how he feels about things today to prove that he will be independent from the White House is likely going to be the most important question that he'll answer when he is up for Senate confirmation.
Yeah, interesting to see what he'll end up doing there. If he does get the job, of course, we don't know exactly what he will do, but what do you think this could potentially mean for folks' mortgage rates, car loans, and credit cards?
Absolutely. You know, a lot of Americans might not go about their day thinking about the Fed, but every decision that the Fed makes comes back to how much they can afford the items they both want and need, how they can borrow, you know, how much it costs to borrow money. Kevin Warsh is probably going to have his work cut out for him. He's going to have to bring very concrete economic evidence to sway the committee off the sidelines. You know, right now, our forecasts are suggesting that we'll see 3 rate cuts this year. Markets are expecting 2, and Fed officials are expecting just 1. So when it comes to how much it costs to borrow money, Kevin Warsh wants it to be a little bit cheaper this year, and he thinks that, you know, booming growth might actually just be a productivity boom that helps inflation maybe not increase as we see booming growth. But as we talk to many Americans out there who are continuing to worry about the job market, who are continuing to worry about affordability problems, it's kind of one of those instances where the economy may be booming, but a lot of Americans' finances are not.
Major change at airport security that went into effect yesterday, and it could catch some travelers off guard and cost you extra time and money. Joining us now is Julian Keel, founder and CEO of Points Path, to break down the new TSA Real ID fee and what we all need to know. Julian, good morning.
Good morning to you.
So this new $45 fee started over the weekend. What exactly does it cover, and what do people need to know about it?
So at this point, if you don't have a real ID and you get to a TSA security checkpoint, you are going to be required to use the new Confirm ID system. The Confirm ID system allows TSA to confirm your identity there at the checkpoint using biometrics, a small background check, that sort of thing. But it does come with a new $45 fee. So if you don't have a real ID by now, you are going to end up having to pay a fee and spending extra time at the checkpoint before you can get to your flight.
Gosh, I'm thinking about the extra time that's going to go into confirming folks. I mean, is this going to lead to a backlog in the TSA lines? Are we worried about folks missing their flights because we're waiting on one guy in front of us trying to get confirmed?
The TSA says that, yes, this will take, if you use the Confirm ID system, at least 10 to 15 minutes to verify your identity, and potentially as much as 30. Now, I do think that people who have regular IDs, real IDs, won't have any significant delays, because the plan is for the TSA to take people who are using the Confirm ID system to another line in order to complete this procedure. Still, for the next few days, if you're traveling, I'd probably leave a few extra minutes, even if you have the right documentation. And if you are going to use Confirm ID, definitely leave yourself some extra time.
Julian, we've been talking about real IDs forever now. I mean, do we have a percentage of how many people don't yet have one who might be taking advantage of this new program?
According to the TSA, 94% of all travelers do have a real ID and won't need to use this system. That would leave just 6% who might need to do the Confirm ID. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you don't have a real ID issued by your state, either a driver's license or an identification, there are other documents that can serve as a real ID. A passport from not just the US, but any country is considered a real ID, a global entry card if you're part of those programs, and even some military IDs. So go to the TSA website, take a look at the list of acceptable real IDs. You might find you already have one in your wallet and you don't even know it.
That's very good advice, Julian. For travelers who aren't sure if they're compliant, they're headed out to the airport. What's the fastest way for them to be able to check?
So if you are looking at your state ID, generally a real ID has a star in the upper right corner, or sometimes an American flag. That indicates it is a real ID. Other IDs might say something like not for federal purposes or some sort of text like that. Every state is, of course, a little bit different. Georgia, wherever you may be, has different rules. But if you don't have a real ID and you are going to use the Confirm ID system, the TSA recommends that you pay the fee in advance using the app or website. That's also going to save you some time at the checkpoint.
All right. I mean, TSA agents for a while now have been scanning our IDs, and now I guess they can swipe our credit card too if we owe them that $45. It's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out.
Americans say saving more money is a top priority this year, but for many, that goal feels out of reach. New data from Bankrate shows 6 in 10 people are uncomfortable with how much they have saved for emergencies, a sign that many feel financially exposed. Nearly 1/4 of Americans say they don't have any emergency savings and would struggle to cover an unexpected expense. Bankrate also says that just 3 in 10 adults say they could pay for a $1,000 emergency using savings, forcing many to rely on credit or debt. So let's look more into the goal of saving money in 2026 with Rod Griffin joining us this morning, the Senior Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy at Experian. Rod, good to have you here this morning. So we are still pretty early into the new year, and a lot of people's goal this year was to save more money, but right now they can't do that. What do you think is the biggest barrier for so many right now?
I think there are a number of things, and half of people told Experian in a survey we did the same thing. They want to save more this year. We've seen inflation and prices rising. We're starting to see that turn maybe a little bit, so that's going to help. But it certainly makes it difficult to save. And coming off of the holidays, we always overspend a bit, so that can make it difficult as well. The key is understanding where your money's coming from and where it's going to, so that you can control it. It doesn't control you, which means that B word none of us like. We need to have a budget. We need to check our credit histories. It's free. You can get a credit report once a week from each of the 3 credit bureaus these days, so 156 a year, so you don't have to worry about being able to know what's there. But then it's about how do you find ways to reduce your expenses and begin to set money aside. But it's that increasing costs coupled with debts can make it difficult to save.
Yeah, and we talked earlier about emergency savings. A lot of people just don't have one. How critical is it to have an emergency savings before you start maybe taking on some bigger financial goals?
It's hugely important to have savings set aside. Even as you mentioned, it's hard for people to have $1,000 to cover an emergency expense. I know it took my wife and I years ago when we first were married to save about 6 months to put $1,000 aside. So that's not a new issue, but you're finding ways to reduce your expenses can really help in being able to set a bit more aside each month. A little bit helps. The rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of savings. But if you use tools that are available to help you save money, things like at Experian, people think of us as a credit bureau, certainly should check your credit report, but we can also help you find credit cards that perhaps would offer a lower interest rate or lower fees that would put some money back in your pocket. We can help you find bills that you may be able to negotiate and reduce those bills each month to save you some money. We can find those streaming services. Think about the Olympics coming up. Make sure you have the streaming services you need to watch, but maybe not stay subscribed to the streaming services that you aren't using anymore. That can be kind of a hidden expense that we often don't think about. We can even help you save money potentially on auto insurance. So we're more than just a credit bureau today. We like to think of ourselves as your big financial friend. We're there to help you find ways to manage your credit, but also save money and be more financially healthy and put those emergency savings aside.
Yeah, every little bit helps. Maybe every subscription also helps as well that you can get rid of. Okay, so before you go, I know a lot of our viewers are probably thinking, look, I'm living paycheck to paycheck right now. What's one small thing that those people can do, a step they can take right now to at least be in a better financial situation?
Yeah, first, again, check your credit report. You need to know where your money's coming from, where it's going to. That's really key. If you take control of your money and what's happening with it, that's step one. Use an app like Experience app to help you find ways to reduce your expenses. And then think about automating payments. That can be very helpful as well. So if you have the minimum payments due at least paid each month automatically from your bank account, checking account, savings account, whatever it might be, that can ensure that you aren't falling behind, that you're not going to ding your credit history with late payments, that sort of thing. And that's going to help you have stronger credit scores and make sure that your finances stay in at least stable condition, so that it's going to help you in the future.
Black History Month is a time to reflect on the achievements, sacrifices, and impact of Black Americans who shared this country. Now here in Georgia, and especially in Atlanta, that history isn't too distant. It's alive in our churches, campuses, neighborhoods, and ongoing fights for equality. Let's dive a little bit deeper into this with Georgia NAACP President Gerald Griggs. Welcome to you this morning. So let's start here. When you look at the state of the country right now, how does Black History Month feel especially relevant for you?
I think it's most poignant at this moment that the country is experiencing, because it lifts up the work of individuals who have not been elevated and celebrated the way they should. So I think it's pivotal to celebrate Black History Month in the current state. You know, we're at the 100th anniversary of the celebration of Black History Month, and I think it's apropos considering the accomplishments of African Americans throughout this country, and we have to highlight those.
You feel like the history and the meaning of Black History Month has changed since you first became involved in civil rights work?
I think it's become stronger. I think, over the last few years, especially during the Black Lives Matter movement, there's been a re-emergence of celebration of our history, not just the figures that we know, but the figures that were unsung and those that remain nameless. So I think it's more important because of the re-energization of the movement recently.
So we know Georgia sits at the center of civil rights history, right? And Atlanta is often called the birthplace of the modern civil rights movement. Do you think we live up to that legacy today in the work that we're doing?
I think many individuals do, but I think as a collective, we need to do better. Our ancestors left us a long mantle of history in this city and around the country that we have to live up to. We have to stand up to the moment. And I think by celebrating our history and remembering that history, we get the energy and the intelligence and knowledge to do that. So I think we still have a ways to go, but I think we are making our ancestors proud.
What do you think gets lost when Black History Month is treated as symbolic instead of more substantive?
I think it's lost that this is a pivotal portion of American history. Black history is American history. And so I think that many of the majority community don't recognize the innovation, the relevance of this particular month, and don't celebrate it the way our community does. This is about celebrating America, the greatness of America, the contributions of Black Americans to make this country great. So I think that's what's left out and what's missing in these celebrations.
So how do you think the strategy of organizing changed in the social media era? I know social media was such a big part of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, but looking at it today, how has the strategy of organizing changed with social media now being on the scene in such a big way?
I think it's evolving. I think we're hearing more of the voices of those that are unsung. We're able to see the struggle across the globe as opposed to seeing it nationally. And we're also able to connect one with another to tell those unsung stories of individuals who were not lifted up in the previous movement. So I think that social media has allowed us to organize at a level that we haven't seen in hundreds of years. And I'm appreciative of the voices of the young people elevating the stories of those that are unsung.
It really struck a chord with me, the theme that Georgia's credit union is using to go with that mural today on the banner in the building, handle with care. What does that mean to you, and what gives you hope as we look toward the future?
I think it means that given the attacks that are happening on diversity, equity, inclusion, and the erasure of Black history, we have to handle this precious jewel with care. I mean, there are so many innovations and so many things that have happened in American history because of African Americans that we cannot erase that. And I think what it means going forward is being intentional in the celebration of diversity, in the celebration of Black excellence, in the celebration of what it truly means to be American and to be a Black American. So I think it's apropos to say handle with care because it's a precious jewel that we have to nurture.
Smyrna is planning a big transformation. The city just approved a redevelopment plan for its downtown, which includes 350 new homes, expanded mixed-use space, and also a bike and footpath right through downtown. Joining me now to talk more about these big plans is Smyrna's Economic Development Director, Andrea Worthy. Andrea, great to have you on this Wednesday morning. So what's next for the plan now that this got the big okay from the City Council?
Well, Jonathan, we spent the last year really concentrating on public engagement so that we could have a plan to move forward. So this is really a big step. But, we'll be moving forward now to try to put together a solicitation to get a development partner to help us build the dream.
Yeah, some big stages, a big early stage for this. But what makes this plan so vital for the growth in the city?
Well, I don't know if you know, but Smyrna was one of the original mixed-use downtown developments that was done in the mid to late 90s and won a big award. And since that time, mixed-use developments and redoing your downtown has come a long way. And so we see this as reinvestment in the community to make what we've got there even better than the Market Village we have there today.
Yeah, we're looking at some of the renderings right now as you speak to us. And I know a lot of times neighbors, they love redevelopment, but they also think about the traffic or perhaps even overdevelopment. Yes. How have you all worked to ease some of those concerns?
Well, again, we took a long time to go through this public engagement process. So I think what came out of this is the majority of the community wants to see mixed use on the site, and that means a mixture of different housing. It means a mixture of retail and restaurants. And this is the way to make that happen. We did work closely with the neighbors directly adjacent to the property to make sure that our concept shows that we want to step down the density as we get closer to existing neighborhoods and keep most of the density closer to the commercial corridors along Atlanta Road.
Awesome. And as we mentioned, this is still just in the early stages. The vote just happened. But what's the timeline now for everything to be completed, or what's really the next big step?
Yeah, so we'll spend a couple of months putting together our RFP process to get a qualified developer, and then hopefully spend some time getting some quality developers to come look closer at the project and propose what they would actually do, of course, based on the public input we've already received. Mm-hmm. We still, the site we have is the First Baptist Church property in downtown. They are still utilizing that site while they are building their new campus nearby. So I suspect it'll probably be the end of 2027 before we see any dirt actually moving on this thing.
All right, that's, that could happen pretty soon. And the overall cost involved here, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we purchased the property and have it under our control, but the reality is this. We envision that this will be borne by the cost of an actual developer who is going to invest in this property and make it their own.
Joining us now to discuss the impact of SNAP and the No Empty Plates Coalition is Stacey Fox, President and CEO of the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Caitlin, thanks for having me.
It's great to be with you here today. We want to make sure that we highlight the message that you're hoping to bring to advocates and lawmakers. What do you really want them to hear today?
Well, we were really excited to see in Governor Kemp's budget this year money to cover the administrative cost shift that came from HR 1 back to the state to support the SNAP program as it exists now, as well as about $18 million additional dollars to help reduce the error rate. We have to remember the budget is a bill, and that bill doesn't usually get passed until the very last minutes of legislative session. So we're at the Capitol. Actually, I'm headed there after we finish today to talk to our lawmakers to remind them how important SNAP is for about 1.4 million Georgians.
That is so many people, Stacey, 1.4 million Georgians. This really does impact so many. Who are the people who you want to make sure are highlighted in this discussion, whose voices are really heard?
Well, today we'll have joining us people who are recipients of the SNAP program. And, you know, Caitlin, SNAP's been around since 1964. This is a public safety net benefit that helps put food on the tables and feed our kids and our elderly and families across the state of Georgia. And they'll be there to make sure their voices get heard to lawmakers.
So important to make sure that we hear from the people who this is directly impacting. What are the biggest threats or policy challenges that SNAP is facing right now across the state and in the federal budget?
Well, Caitlin, I'm so glad you asked that question. I think one of the things we fight against every day is this idea of waste, fraud, and abuse. Mistakes or error rates that we see in SNAP that have to do with program costs are not fraud. These are mistakes made by caseworkers who have really high workloads and SNAP recipients who have really busy lives and inconsistent earnings. So that's one thing we want to fight against while we're talking to lawmakers today.
Yeah, that's an important part that you highlight there. And what happens to communities when SNAP benefits are reduced or become harder to access, especially in rural areas?
Yes, such a good question, Caitlin. I mean, SNAP isn't just about putting food on people's tables. It's also about the grocers who provide the food and our farmlands around the state that provide the food to the grocers. This becomes a domino effect when folks aren't able to access SNAP, and we saw that when the government shut down last year. So that is certainly not something we want to repeat, and really thrilled to see Governor Kemp put the money in the budget that is so needed to maintain this program.
I know the advocacy work you do goes on all year. You pour so much time and energy into it. And then you get to the Capitol, and legislators don't always have the time to give back, to hear all of the points that you're making here. If you could only make one point to legislators, what is the most important thing that they need to hear?
The most important thing is that we need to keep the governor's about $50 million in the budget to support the SNAP program due to the administrative cost shift from HR 1, and about the $18 million in the budget to reduce SNAP error rates.
Yeah, that is super important. Can you talk a little bit about what message people who receive SNAP are hoping that lawmakers hear?
Yeah, I mean, I think folks who rely on SNAP literally rely on these the safety benefit to put food on their table and feed their families. And I think that's what lawmakers will hear today from SNAP recipients, is that this is something that they rely on. And, you know, Caitlin, when benefits go away, like SNAP, when the government shut down, then families are really forced to make hard decisions between things like putting food on their table and medication that somebody in the family might really need, or daycare so that someone can go to work. These are cost determinations or decisions that families should not be burdened with. And we're glad to see the state step up, and we want to see them hold the line in the budget.
And we did see so much impact with the government shutdown. We saw people who weren't receiving their benefits coming to us every day saying, you know, please, can you help? Can you do something about this? I think if you're not familiar with SNAP, you might not recognize how direct that impact is for people who don't receive this assistance when they are relying on it. Can you just talk about how catastrophic this is for families?
Yeah, I mean, SNAP really is like a loaded credit card when folks go to the grocer to buy food for their families. And when that card doesn't have money on it, they can't spend it, right? And so the grocer can't sell money, and the families can't buy food for their families. And there's no other way to make this up. You know, a lot of people think, well, the food banks could step in, and yes, they are there and part of the safety net, and they are so important. But for every meal that a food bank provides across the state of Georgia, SNAP provides 7 meals. SNAP is so important, and that is not a hole that our food banks or any other safety net program could fill.
That is an astounding statistic. Just lastly, if you had to clear up one misconception that people might have about SNAP, what is it?
Well, I would go back to the waste, fraud, and abuse, Caitlin. I hear that from so many lawmakers who, or the sort of bootstrap mentality. You know, these are programs to help our families, and I think that is part of our responsibility as a government is to help take care of families when they're hungry or when they need health care. So those are things that we want to combat, and reasons why we bring folks who are recipients of SNAP and the SNAP benefit to the Capitol so that we can put a face to the program. I always think that makes such a difference to lawmakers.